my name is Mark Upton. I'm the Director of Sales for the Feed Additive Division for Central Life Sciences. I'm here in my barn today and I had a couple of really exciting things I wanted to pass on. First of all, as some of you may know, I've got a small herd of cows and horn flies are a terrible problem on pastured animals. We've got the perfect solution and it's called Altosid IGR. There's not a better horn fly control product on the market, and horn flies are the biggest economic threat to pastured cattle. Altosid offers some really good benefits, about a 13-to-1 return on investment. Stocker trials indicate about almost a 16% improvement in gain if you're controlling those horn flies. But the really exciting thing is we've lowered the price this year. Now you can feed Altosid for about 2 to 3 cents per head per day. That's way cheaper than tags, sprays, other forms of fly control, and it works way better as well. Resistance isn't an issue. Altosid is the product of choice for pastured cattle.
Flies are not only bothersome to cattle, but also to the profitability of an operation. It's estimated that horn flies alone cost North American cattle producers over $1 billion each year. Add in other kinds of flies and you've got a potent threat to cattle production.
Well, flies are a problem for many different reasons. When you get out on pasture, it's typically the horn fly that's the problem. And they're doing a lot of things. They're actually removing blood. They're blood feeders, and so they're removing blood off the cow, and so they're having to use that nutrition to replenish the blood versus make milk or meat. And they can also spread some disease. Some Staph aureus is a concern. When you get in confinement, there's multiple flies that are a problem, mostly a stable fly and a house fly. They're also spreading a lot of disease. They're a terrible nuisance, sometimes nuisance to the animal, sometimes just nuisance to the workers. But the biggest concern there is the disease spreading, and then they're slowing down the production. We're there to put beef on calves, and it's going to slow that down.
Yeah, if you have a bad fly problem, the daily gains, they decrease, the cows are uncomfortable, conception rates seem to be lower.
We started having a lot of problems with flies. Face flies, horn flies, a lot of flies, also horse flies, and even whenever we were grazing, always seemed to be a problem with pink eye, or it's just the cows were very uncomfortable in the summertime.
What we're really talking about is cow comfort. So if we can keep these animals comfortable, they're going to gain more weight, more efficiently, quicker, and last thing we need is flies, fighting against that.
Scott, a beef cattle producer, and Aaron, a dairy producer, know that by keeping their cattle more comfortable, they'll be more productive and profitable. To accomplish this, they turn to different products from Central Life Sciences to prevent costly problems caused by flies.
Fly problems are different from pasture to what we call confinement situations. It makes a difference on whether you're going to use Altosid in a pasture or Clarifly in a feedlot or confinement type situation.
Using Clarifly and having more comfortable cows, you take care of your cows and they'll take care of you. And we try to make sure our cows are as stress-free as possible. Cow comfort plays a big role in production and also in public perception of dairy farmers or cattlemen in general. And it really helps our cows maintain a high standard of living.
We'll start feeding the Altosid 1st of March, and we'll keep feeding Altosid till about the 1st of November. We don't have any pink eye to speak of. They keep their condition better, and cows are a lot more comfortable.
Whether using Altosid in the pasture or Clarifly in the dairy, both are feed-through products, making them easy to use. And each product targets flies where it counts.
So what we're referring to when we talk about a feed-through is this is a product that you can actually put in your feed, in your mineral, your liquid feed, whatever it might be. We're just simply feeding it to this cow. We're putting it in one end so it can be passed out in the other end. We've got to get it into the manure. An old saying is you got to get the drug to where the bug is. So we're feeding it to the animal so that she can put it out the back end. When that fly comes to the manure to lay an egg, you're preventing that egg from becoming an adult fly.
The real key to using a feed-through like Altosid is making sure you get a good consistent intake. And one of the main battles on that is making sure that you have a good mineral product or feed product that the feed-through, such as Altosid, is mixed through evenly. So having something that's done at the mill and pre-mix is half the battle.
The Altosid goes in our mineral. It's all pre-mixed in there. And then our liquid Accuration has it in it also. Well, it's real convenient and easy to use. Just open the bag and pour it in the feeder as you need to use it.
Since using Altosid and Clarifly, Scott and Aaron are seeing results not only in their cow herds, but also in their profits.
Cattle, they're more content, more settled. They're not fighting flies, and they're not aggravated, and they're happier. Happy cows make more money. You can't afford not to use it. Every time you dump a bag of mineral in the feeder, it's money in your pocket.
Basically, a feed-through is a pesticide, goes through the digestive systems, not absorbed by the animal, goes into the manure, which is where the insects are reproducing, and it basically stops the growth. For the control of horn flies, you want to use the proven leader in the industry, Altosid IGR feed-through. The active ingredient in Altosid IGR feed-through is S-methoprene. We've worked with that compound in several different markets for well over 40 years. There has been no resistance developed to it. As a matter of fact, the way it works, it's very unlikely that resistance will develop to it.
Altosid IGR and Clarify larvicide are really, it's a different approach to taking care of flies. Typically what we see is we've had tags and sprays that are adulticides, so they kill on contact and they're really targeting adults. Where Altosid IGR and Clarify larvicide are different is that we are stopping the life cycle. We're interrupting that process so we never see those adults emerge. Manure is the site of where those female flies will lay their eggs. So by treating that manure and having the compound in the manure where those eggs are being laid, then that's where we're seeing that contact and that life cycle stoppage begins. It's very user-friendly, so the animal is actually going to do the work for us by depositing Altosid IGR or Clarify larvicide into manure, where the eggs are going to be laid in that fresh manure, and we're going to be able to start the process of elimination. As long as they're consuming the product, and it's going to pass through the system in the animal and deposit in the manure where those female flies are going to lay her eggs. Altosid is designed to control horn flies, and horn flies is our #1 issue in pasture. Altosid IGR is actually a growth inhibitor. After the larva stage, then it goes into pupa stage, and we're actually going to stop the life cycle there, and the pupa is going to think it's a full adult, and it will never emerge and cause us issues with our animals. Clarifly is actually cleared for 4 species of flies: the house, stable, and the face, and the horn. Clarifly is a chitin inhibitor, so the chitin is really involved with the exoskeleton in that fly. And so by stopping that exoskeleton from being formed, then that fly pupa will never be able to be an adult without an exoskeleton. The one thing about Altosid IGR and Clarify larvicide being feed-through fly controls, it's a paradigm change. We've been dealing with flies since the beginning of time, and usually we have a spray option, we have tags available, and those are the application options that we've had. Now we have a feed-through fly control, which is a complete change in how we approach things versus a spray or a tag where we have to get the cattle up, handle the cattle, create more stress that we're trying to reduce. This allows us to take care of our daily lives. We're feeding the cattle anyway, and we're taking care of flies in the process. What makes a fly infestation bad is a little bit in the eye of the beholder. We will never be fly-free. We will always have flies in the environment. If I get a phone call from a producer and say that I've started using Altosid IGR or Clarify larvicide and I still have flies, I'm going to start asking a few questions. First is, how long have you been on product? It's very important. We want to start providing product to our animals before flies emerge. It gives us the best opportunity to get in front of the fly population. That fly life cycle is 28 days, and so we have to allow that cycle to break for us to start seeing the majority of the benefits. So the question is, when should I see reduction in the flies? We start feeding the product on day 1. By day 3, that manure, which is the most important area, is treated at a lethal level. we need to wait 4 weeks before you see a significant change. We'll see slight change, but we have to break that life cycle first. So we will have some manure available that is still lively enough to allow those flies to emerge. Okay, so we will always have flies on property at some point in time, but there is an economic threshold in a beef operation. As long as we stay under that 200 fly threshold, then economically we're still performing very well. We increase over that 200 flies per animal, then we start seeing reductions in our milk and beef production on farm. As a dairy operator, our economic threshold is going to be 50 stable flies per animal. When we start exceeding 50 flies per animal, then we start seeing reductions in herd performance. As a beef producer, our ultimate goal is to raise as much pounds of beef per acre as we can. For a dairy, our ultimate goal is to raise as much pounds of milk per cow that we possibly can. And fly control we view as not as an expense, but as an investment to help maximize that genetic potential that those cows have.
We've talked about for a long time the whole impact of horn flies on cattle is weight gains is the number one thing that most people are concerned about, because weight gains are going to play directly into their pocketbook. So when you think about a stocker or even a mama cow having 40 blood meals a day from one single horn fly, and when you start multiplying that times hundreds of thousands of horn flies per animal, you can see why they're pretty stressed out, and that's obviously not comfortable for them and doesn't allow them to be efficient. If you're stressed out, you're not going to perform the way you want to perform. And so that animal's in the corner of the fence line, fighting flies, stressed out, stomping, kicking, doing all the things that you as a producer don't want them doing. You want them out there grazing, comfortable, and growing and putting weight on. And when they're fighting flies, they're not doing that. In the OSU stocker study, basically what we had were two groups. A group with no fly control, and then a group with our Altosid IGR fly control. And so the whole idea behind that was just to find out, does it make that big of a difference to control flies on stockers, and what impact does that have on weight gains? And obviously in that study it showed that it did have a big impact. More than 15% difference in weight gain, and the difference between the treated herd and the untreated herd, that comes out to almost 28 pounds, so a little over 27 pounds in weight gain difference. You start putting that into a calculator, or you start comparing it to cattle costs, and all of a sudden you start realizing, man, that's costing a lot of money. Those horn flies are costing you by not getting those extra weight gains that the treated herd was getting versus not doing fly control. You know, a lot of times that can make a difference between breaking even or making money to a cattle producer. But when you look at that study, if you want to put ROI to it, we found that it was a 6.5 to 1 ratio on the investment that someone was putting in with their fly control to the return that they were getting. It's an investment in your herd, it's not a cost added expense to your herd.
November 2014, the Journal of Animal Science published a very enlightening study. They looked at the effect of horn flies on several different breeds of beef cows, and they found that horn flies reduce the amount of milk that beef cows produce. What was really interesting from that study is horn flies also reduced the quality of the milk. There was less solids, less butter fat, less protein in it. The horn flies had a very important effect on the amount and the quality of milk produced. And a lot of people don't even know that study exists. But that is very important work to go back and let cattle producers know that horn fly control can have a dramatic effect on the growth of those calves. Horn flies on cattle will increase heart rate, they will increase body temperature, they will increase dramatically water intake, and if they dramatically increase water intake, they also increase urine output. That means that there is significantly less retained nitrogen in an animal's digestive system, which means that there's less protein available to that animal. Then the other thing is, horn flies routinely carry bacteria that cause mastitis or cause teat and udder infections that can ultimately cause scar tissue, that can reduce that udder's ability to produce and make milk. The lower number of horn flies, the less potential there is for stress, the less potential there is for, on the teat and udder infections, and the less potential there is for reducing the amount of milk and reducing the quality of the milk. And that's one of the things that horn fly control with Altosid does. Whenever an animal has an infection of some kind, it's going to have an effect on her conception rates. And that's one thing many people don't understand. There is a very narrow window of time that a cow needs to conceive so we can have calves born at a certain time, so we can have a consistent, easily marketable calf crop. And if you've got cows that are fighting mastitis or other internal infections because we're not controlling the horn flies, it's going to have an effect on conception. Cows with mastitis, they can take up to 25% longer to conceive. They can have abortions, fetuses can be absorbed. Those infections, whether they're subclinical or clinical, they can have an effect on conception rates, teat and udder infections that can ultimately cause scar tissue, that can reduce that udder's ability to produce and make milk. If you protect the health of that udder by controlling horn flies, how much longer are we going to get to use that cow before we have to invest in a replacement heifer to take her place? If we can get another year, maybe 2 to 3 years out of the useful life of that cow, because she's producing more milk with a healthier udder, that's going to have a significant effect on what the bottom line is on the ledger sheet. If you do the numbers, that means that horn flies can add $40 to $50 to the cost of raising a calf. Those kind of small costs like that can have a dramatic effect on the continuing year-to-year success of a cattle ranch or any cattle operation. If you use Altosid on range cattle, Clarifly on confined cattle, by controlling flies, you're going to help performance and you're going to help maintain a better general health of that animal. When you have a better health of that animal, that's going to increase her productive life. That's going to make her last longer to where she produces more dollars. One of the things a lot of people do not take into consideration about their heifers or replacement heifers from their cows is they have to have a long-term functioning mammary system. Because without a healthy mammary system, you're not going to have that calf reach his genetic potential for growth. Now, Dr. Steve Nickerson at the University of Georgia tells us from his research it is not uncommon to see heifers 5 to 6 months old that already have teat infections. And up to 50% of it was caused by flies, especially horn flies, whether it's on a pasture system of raising dairy heifers or beef replacement heifers. We want to start out protecting the health of that mammary system as early as possible. And that's one of the reasons why horn fly control with Altosid IGR feed-through is so effective. We've had several producers said that 3 or 4 years after they started using Altosid IGR feed-through in their fly season supplement program, they were seeing less and less blind quarters all the time. The point is, by controlling the horn flies, not only do you help with the weaning weight, not only do you help the health and body condition of your cows, you also are going to help maintain the health of that udder so you get a more useful lifetime out of individual cows and ultimately reduce the cost of production by not having to put in replacement heifers so often by cleaning up mastitis in those herds.
I wouldn't say that there is an actual silver bullet because all flies are different. Not all flies behave in the same ways or lay their eggs in the same places. So knowing what type of fly you're dealing with and then also what tools you're dealing with in the toolbox as far as fly control is really important. Using Altosid IGR in a pasture situation to control horn flies is really the optimum product to use, because those horn flies, they stay on that cow all day long, and the only place that they can lay their egg is in that fresh manure. Clarifly larvicide is great to use in confined situations because you're dealing mainly with house flies and stable flies. While you're taking care of what you need to on that one particular ranch or dairy or feedlot by treating the manure with Clarifly and stopping those flies from emerging into adult flies, you also have to deal with incoming flies and the reality of that, and that's where some of our other products, some of our Starbar products come into play.
Clarify larvicide and Altosid IGR are best used in a comprehensive integrated pest management program, and by doing so you will significantly reduce the fly population on your operation. It's important to have an IPM program because there's no silver bullet for fly control. Aside from Clarify larvicide and Altosid IGR, it's important to also consider using Starbar products to catch and or kill incidental flies around your operation. It's what we call a complete IPM program. A comprehensive IPM program consists of 3 steps that we like to call PI: planning, implementation, and evaluation. Look at your operation as a whole and where you can benefit from putting this IPM program into effect, whether it be the confined cattle that are just stomping and swishing and clumping together, same as with your pasture cattle where they are just clumped up and not doing what they should be doing, which is just eating.
The most important thing for a comprehensive fly control program is the integrated pest management program, and that's a combination of not only management practices such as rotation, elimination of habitat, but also different methods of fly control, being feed-through fly control products, and then on-animal and on-premise bait sprays and traps. When you're looking at an integrated pest management plan, the basis for that is your feed-through fly control products. The feed-through fly control products that Central Life Sciences offers are Altosid IGR, which is for horn fly control in pasture cattle, and Clarifly larvicide for control of not only horn flies but also face flies, house flies, and stable flies in confinement situations. Feed-through fly controls can help control your fly populations, but there will be times where you may need to use either on-animal spot applications such as Prolate Lintox as a spray or a back rub, and some of our other pyrethrin or permethrin products, but also we have a complete line of baits and traps that will also help with house flies and your premise applications. The most popular baits from Starbar are going to be Quick Strike Scatterbait, Golden Mallard Scatterbait, and Cyanorox. They all have different active ingredients and different modes of action, and by rotating those you eliminate or lower your chances of building resistance in your fly population. Our traps are going to be for your house fly problems basically, and also stable flies. So we have the bite-free stable fly trap, which is specifically targeted for stable flies, and then we have our easy traps, trap and toss, fly relief. Those are all for your house fly problems. I think one of the most common misconceptions with fly control is that there is only one application or one product that can be used to control your fly population. With an integrated pest management program, you want to combine as many methods of control as you can for the best possible control.
30/30 program is basically our recommendation to have Clarifly larvicide or Altosid IGR in your product 30 days prior to that last frost in the spring. And what that's going to do is just get you a jump start, so you've got treated manure as you've got warmer weather coming. Typically anywhere around 65 degrees is where those flies will begin to emerge in the spring. Basically trying to get some things ahead of time, being proactive, being ready, and bring some of those adult populations down before they can really get started. On the flip side of it is 30 days after that first frost in the fall. Just trying to, again, have treated manure, so any eggs that are laid in that manure from that point forward, less chance of any of those starting for the following spring. So again, you're trying to get product into the animals, so you have treated manure 30 days prior to that last frost in the spring, 30 days after the first frost in the fall.
So Altosid IGR and Clarify larvicide have some very strong data to support improved health, improved efficiency, increased weight gains, and obviously reducing overall fly populations on the facility. For customer that is going to introduce Altosid IGR to their feeding program, it is very important to maintain consistent intake, and to do that, there's a couple tips. One, we want to have about a 5 to 7 day supply in the feeders at any one time. We want to maintain good moisture control and make sure the product is nice and fresh as much as possible. We want to position those feeders around loafing areas, water supplies, or feed bunks to make it accessible for those animals. Operators should check those feeders as frequently as possible, and the more frequently that we can measure that, the more concise that we can be in our management of those feeders. One thing to keep in mind, as an operator, we will never be fly-free. However, there is an economic threshold for both Altosid IGR and Clarify larvicide. So just because we have a few flies doesn't mean that's going to have a negative impact on us economically. Altosid IGR is the gold standard in controlling horn flies. Data has shown it is statistically over years, over a long period of time, it has been proven that it is a consistent way to control horn flies.
Real important to have the right mixtures and the proper mixing of the products back into whether you are making a mineral, a supplement, a tub, or a block. We're using very low inclusion rates for this, and to be able to get that done and done consistently back into the products, the mixing and the micro mixing of our products is very important. Also looking to make sure that the formulations are correct, as well as then having those formulations that are going to provide a consistent intake on a day in and day out basis. That will help to ensure a lot more consistency and a lot more control in your overall fly control program. The problem with hot and low spots is simply then you're not going to have even intakes of the active ingredient on a daily basis, and eventually then you're going to have some spikes or some hatches that are going to produce a lot more adult flies. Meeting expectations for control really has a lot to do with intake and making sure that the animals are getting a consistent intake on a daily basis, where feeders aren't running out of product with Altosid IGR or Clarify larvicide, so that there's product in front of them at all times.